Hey team, welcome back to another great episode of the Intentional Agribusiness Leader Podcast. This is Mark Jewell, your host, and today I'm joined by Dr. Karl Wyant. He is Director of Agronomy at Nutrien. Karl, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Sounds like your dog's excited for me to be there too.
She is she's chiming in, she's ready. It's the time of day when she sits here and watches all the other ones walk by. So
Oh,
uh,
okay.
she might she might chime in here again, man. But thanks for being on. Karl, what does it mean for you to be intentional?
I think intentional, we've got these whirlwinds that we live in, professionally, personally, and I think to be intentional means you really just carve out whatever you want to get done. You say, hey, here's a priority instead of it just getting lost in the mess of things and the busyness of things. You say, I'm gonna carve this thing out, whether it's a thought, whether it's an activity, whether it's a goal. You carve it out and you kind of put it on the mantle and give it some priority.
I like that. I like that. I mean, so often when it comes down to like just getting what you want, first of all, it starts with knowing what you want, having some clarity.
Sure,
But
sure.
just carving out the time, make it a priority, actually put it on the calendar, and then stick to it. I think the big problem a lot of people struggle with is actually sticking to it once they put it on the calendar, right?
That's
So,
right.
uh, talk to us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do at Nutrien. I think that everybody will be wanting to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm the director of agronomy at Nutrien on the wholesale side. So that's the mining and manufacturing of fertilizers. So Nutrien's the world's largest NPK producer. We've got mines in Saskatchewan. We've got phosphate plants in North Carolina and Florida, and we've got nitrogen facilities located throughout the Western Hemisphere. And so we produce fertilizers and we sell our products mainly into ag retails. And as the director of agronomy, we help make sure that those ag retail customers are up to date on the best management practices for fertilizer management. And then we serve a bunch of corporate hats as well with managing some of our premium fertilizer products and helping out with our investor relations and some of our internal training as well.
Very cool. What was the pathway that brought you into a role like this?
Yeah, 10 years ago, I was a freshly minted PhD out of Arizona State University with a PhD where I got to go live in the desert every summer and dig holes and study soil and get sunburned and dodge rattlesnakes, and they gave me a degree for it, I guess. Maybe they felt sorry for me, but I really enjoyed the experience. Desert soil science is a passion. I'm from New Mexico. I got real creative, and now I live in Arizona. So desert through and through, but Helena Agri Enterprises hired me as a desert agronomist, so a technical person to
Sure.
help justify why we were selling certain fertilizer management programs and products and such throughout the desert farming areas. And I kind of worked my way up into covering all of California and Arizona for precision agriculture and agronomy. And then just a few years ago, kind of made a surprising move. I moved to a biotech startup here in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and I was their VP of Ag Science for a couple of years for Helier. And then just over 2 years ago, I moved into Nutrien as the director of agronomy here on the wholesale side.
Quite the journey, man. Quite the journey.
You know,
Been through.
most journeys aren't linear. They're like a little bit of a there's
Yeah.
surprises a lot that are involved in you. The thing you're doing now might not be the thing that you do 5 years from now, and I've appreciated the ability to grow and learn and see new things and do new things and have a good time doing it.
You bet. Well, you've gotten to see under the hood of a number of different organizations along the way. So I'm curious. One of the things we often talk about, just about every show, is what have you seen that's working? What are you seeing that's working around talent attraction, talent retention? Seems to be the big conversation out there that it's very, very hard to do. So just curious what you've seen that is or has worked in your experience.
Yeah, I've been in a few organizations, and some organizations that had a lot of turnover, some organizations that had very little turnover, so kind of that spectrum. And what I find is that folks like to be valued. And if you can value their utility and their contributions and help set them up for, like, I had my own path in life, right? And I think our people do too. They want to get places. They have goals, and just kind of having that chat with them. It's like, hey, where do you want to be? And how do we get there? That's gone a long way for just keeping folks on the team and keeping them engaged. And I'd say for the talent attraction, some of that is still the old-fashioned way, where you're out looking for it, right? Like a baseball scout,
Hmm.
and you're trying to find those rising stars and be like, okay, I can see this person, developing them and making them like a part of my team for the next, you know, long while.
Are there any PhDs that you know out there in the talent space practicing some like Billy Bean?
Solid
Like where?
reference.
Yeah, who
Yeah.
are the talent specialists out there in the crunching those numbers, trying to find the good talent?
That's such a hard thing finding, because I'm in the agronomy side. Like, I'm looking for
Yeah,
technical people, but finding those like Billy Bean numbers about folks that can go out and ride with a salesperson in the truck all day and
yeah.
like not drive everybody crazy, or lose sight of the message, and it's maybe the end goals of that ride along. That is a hard thing to calculate. I can feel my way through that a little bit. I don't have a metric. I don't have a small ball metric yet for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I feel if we had cracked that code, I would want to be on top of that. We have a lot of agronomists in our various coaching programs, obviously, and
Yeah.
the for a lot of companies too, it's not just the agronomic standpoint. It's the communication skills, the sales ability, as well. Because as you know, in many companies, you're doing both, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
it can be, I mean, it can be a real challenge. I was just in a conversation with one of the large distributors today, talking through, well, where do we start in this whole sales development? Do we start with the skills, that the business acumen and the sales skills? Or do we move over? Are the agronomic skills more important? Which one is it? And there's no clear answer. Of course, there's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of opinions, but we got to start somewhere as we're developing people. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Probably the place to start is goals. Like, what do you got to do this year to keep your sales number? And if it's attached to a dollar amount, like, well, what do we do to get there? And I think
Yeah.
that's every great salesperson I've ever known has always had super clear goals, and they've got like almost in their, they can draw it out to you on the Waffle House napkin, like how I'm gonna get there. And I think that's a skill set that needs more attention, not only in agronomy but across most sales organizations.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You've gone from a larger entity in the ag space to startup, back to larger entity. So, I'm kind of curious about your experience and experiencing those different cultures. Some people are pretty intentional about it. Some people talk about it, don't do much about it. It's kind of curious. What have you observed that's worked in being able to curate really good culture that obviously helps keep people around and so forth? But just kind of curious in your experience being able to see probably such a dichotomy between those two, different sizes of groups.
Yeah, across that spectrum, the teams that had the clearest sense of culture, I felt were always the most successful. So you can have a really good culture in a small company. You can have a really not as good of a culture at a big company, right? So I think the ones that really come to the table every day and they're like, here's why we're in this business. Here's what we got to get done. Here's the expectations from a team member, just in terms of what they got to show up with every morning. Um, and then here's the prize. Here's when we do win, let's celebrate. Let's like the Oakland days of 20 years ago when they won big.
Yeah.
Um, really have that culture built in. So regardless of the size of the company, focusing on culture is I think is super important. And I've been lucky enough to experience some really nice cultures along the way.
Wonderful, man. Anything in particular that stood out that you guys did that helped you around culture creation? Just like, I mean, it's like little rituals or things like that were unique.
A lot of fun. When we show up to work every day, I think we want utility. And I think what happens in the sales world, and agronomy is a part of that, right? The technical side of supporting sales is you have a goal and you work your tail off to meet that goal, and then it's just like, okay, on to the next goal. The most fun I've ever had on a team is when we hit that goal, you celebrate it. You hand out awards, you have a good time, you go down and go out to the restaurant, have a meal. Like you take the time to really appreciate what you've done, and especially if it was a goal that was hard fought, and recognize the hard work and the time away from families and such. So I think we got to celebrate our wins more instead of just like, well, that's what we were supposed to do, or on to the next goal. It's like, let's just take an hour just to say, let's just toot our own horns here and have a good time and make sure that we're all acknowledging what we just got done.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think one recommendation I would give any manager, anybody who's leading people at any level of the organization in any department, would be to get into the practice of focusing on some gratitude and some wins
Yeah,
on the consistent, right, on the consistent basis. And we all do a great job of beating ourselves up over what we think we're doing wrong, or where we don't think we're performing enough, or especially when we're behind, or now we have
yeah,
a little bit tougher ag cycle going on. So people are going to be, it's going to be very easy to focus on what's not working. What we notice from as a people development company, when we get people into our coaching conversations, whether it be one-on-one or group, it is like pulling teeth
hmm
to get people to just go, we'll be on a Zoom call and I'll be like, hey, I'm going to teach on this topic for 10 minutes. While I'm doing that, I just want you to go to the chat. This is what I say. This is my line. This is my script. Like, I want you to go to the chat on the Zoom, and I want you to write down from our last call 2 weeks ago to today, what's one win? What's one area, one way, something that you won with, right? And I'll get done teaching and I'll go back and there are zero comments. And I have to come back and
like
revisit. Like, okay, I will continue the
no
call.
wins, huh?
Does nobody have a win? Because we're
Yeah,
not trained. Number one, we're not really trained to focus on what's working. Now, if I ask them to put, hey, what's not working, fills up, no problem, right? Plenty of challenges, plenty of issues, plenty of things we want to complain about. Not always so many things that we want to celebrate. And you're spot on. I wish we would spend more time celebrating what is good.
yeah, and it makes work a lot more fun too.
Well, it does. It does. Tony Robbins has a great quote. He says, where your focus goes, your energy flows."
Yeah, sure, sure,
You
sure.
know, so as long as you're focused on what's not working, your energy is gonna dip, and it's gonna feel hard, and it's gonna feel heavy. But as soon as you start to get in that practice of focusing on something that is working, it's interesting how other things start clicking too.
Yeah, yeah.
So, good stuff, man. What has been the biggest challenge for you, Karl, over the course of your career that has popped up, something you had to go to battle with, and has benefited you to this day?
You know, probably my biggest challenge I've had is really understanding ways of working. I've often had some pretty wide experience ranges on the team. Some of the folks that are new to the game and new to agronomy, and some folks that have been doing this for a long time, and understanding what those different team members need from a leader. Sometimes the folks with a lot of experience, they don't need a whole lot of management. They want to do their thing, have that autonomy, and it's about developing trust in that ability to sort of get stuff done. Whereas like a less experienced member might need a little more coaching, a little more face to face, and because most of my teams have been spread out across the country. Um, One thing I've also learned, and this is maybe just related to my own ego, is man, if you got experience on your team, you've got to listen to it. Like, ask them what they think, ask them what they know, ask them what they've
Mm-hmm.
been through in the past. If you're not listening to the experienced folks on your team, you are missing like half the game here. Like, you are really leaving some key information that could be helpful for your decision quality that you have to make as a leader.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. I think, well, there's two things you said that are really interesting. One is just recognizing where people are at
Yeah.
in their journey, and then how to manage, based on the type of, what's the proper application of intervention, right? If
Yeah.
you get somebody who's a experienced high performer, it's remove roadblocks, right? You get somebody who's experienced or less experienced but highly motivated, cool, let's do skill training.
Yeah.
But if they're low motivation, high ability, right, that's a different type of conversation. There's something that's off. They've grown disengaged for some reason. We have to address that differently. So but
Fortunately, I haven't had to deal with a whole lot of that low motivation, high
yeah,
ability. I've always had folks that come to the table every day and they want to get
ready to
something done.
rock.
They want to contribute. It's just figuring out where on that spectrum of knowledge and experience they are so we can best direct their talent. And I think more importantly, direct their development.
Yep, 100%. Love it. And then, so on the other side of this, though, I think there are so many ways to be able to capture the institutional knowledge that are walking around our organizations today, right? I mean, anybody who's been in this game for 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. I mean, so I've met some people recently that are 40 years, into the game. They know some things, like they've seen some stuff right
Yeah.
now. As an example, by the time this comes out, probably right after the first of the year ish in 2025 is when this will probably be hitting. I would, people are going to be well into this cycle where selling feels hard, right? Especially at the ag retail level. And so, what I'm saying, based on my observation and questions that I've asked from the experienced veterans that we sometimes get to work with, is what I'm most excited about is there are a lot of salespeople that are about to get made,
Yeah.
right? There are
Yeah.
a lot of them going to quit too. But this is when you're gonna, like, if you can make it through the next 2-3 years and come out the other side of this, like, you're gonna be seasoned, your capacity is gonna be higher, your ability to sales manage. Even from thinking about the sales managers, we have a lot of them in our programs right now who are looking for answers. How do I get these guys motivated? How do I lift them up? Like, we go talk to the people that have been through it.
Yeah. Yep.
know? Go
I agree with
just
you.
take them out to lunch, buy them lunch, and ask them questions.
Yeah, I was fortunate early on in my career to see an ag retail where we had some folks that had 30, 40 years of selling and starting a program, and I was helped them train them on the agronomy side. But we would put the new people with the experienced folks and let them just ride around with them a couple times a week and go on sales calls, like learn how to listen to how the sales process goes, what questions to ask, what questions not to ask,
Mm-hmm.
how to position and negotiate. Um, and then the more experienced person, got some tasks taken off their plate. Like they no longer had to go soil sample when it was 110 degrees out, or go do cotton tissue sampling in July. Like that was the younger person that they were paying their dues, right? So it was a
Sure.
pretty cool model to see it work out. And after a couple of years of that younger salesperson, if they passed all those tests, they kind of got their sales number, and I think started out way ahead of the gate than someone who was just handed a truck and a clipboard and go sell.
Yep.
Much more, I think, rich experience, and I think long term it'll pay off.
Absolutely. I agree. It's cool. One pro tip I'd offer to anybody listening, yourself included, is you can sit down and very easily do what you and I are doing right now, which is recording a conversation.
Yeah,
Right. I mean,
sure.
we make this is an interview style podcast. Every single one is an interview with somebody who's in a leadership role like you are. And I mean, we have harnessed 100. Now you're over in the 100s in the terms of the number of interviews we've done.
Cool.
So that's almost 100 hours of leadership knowledge that we've been able to capture. Right. And I'm one guy.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, you have so many of those opportunities to just schedule those meetings with people in your company, around your company, in your space that have been through some things. Like, capture this. One of the beautiful things about it creates a transcript,
yeah.
and we take that transcript and plug it into ChatGPT, and we ask it questions. Right, like
Oh, cool.
we're actually able to pull training now out of these interviews that we can then repurpose and put that in front of our clients and put in front as wisdom, as advice.
Yeah, sure, sure.
And so these things are not. it takes time. You have to make yourself sit down and do it. And I'm probably the only one sitting around thinking about ways to do that all the time. But you can do this for your
Institutional
team.
memory, that's a great thing to think about, especially as we have this retirement. I
Yeah.
don't want to call it a crisis, but oh, I think ag is going to get woken up severely in 10 years. Like, okay,
Yeah. Just
okay, we
watch.
lost a huge chunk of our sales force. And of course, in Silicon Valley, they're not inventing anything useful like a USB you can put into a guy with a 40-year career and download all of his knowledge and remember that institutional knowledge. They're busy making like drones with pepper spray on them or whatever.
Right.
Um, but until then, we have to make sure we're intentional about that transfer. And I have conversations with my more experienced team all the time about, okay, write down what you know, because at some point I'm going to have to be the historian, and I need to know stuff that happened in the 90s and the 80s, because I wasn't working, I was out skateboarding, listening to Limp Bizkit instead, like you're supposed to, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's just society recognizing that knowledge and that experience just in general. We could probably do a better job.
Yeah. And by the way, I really appreciate that you're the first person in over 100 interviews who has brought up Limp Bizkit on one-way
Hey,
interviews. So
wait till I get to Creed. We'll get them all covered here.
come on, man.
Yeah.
Let's go 90. Let's go deep on 90s Christian. I love it.
You got it. You got it.
Oh, good. Who's been somebody that you've looked up to or admired over the course of your career?
I've had a lot of really good mentors across these positions I've had, and what they've all had in common was like this, just like thinking about, okay, I've got this person, where do they want to go, and how do we set up a path to get there? For me, I wanted to learn more about public speaking and doing agronomy. So like first month into the job, I got invited to go speak about iron nutrition in pistachios in Central Valley, California. And it's like, okay, here's your opportunity. Start learning, and here's some feedback. And so, same with sales and negotiation and international real business relationships. I think the leaders that find this space for you at the table, instead of protecting it all and I don't know, keeping those chairs not full. I've always had a lot of admiration for that. So the guy that I first worked with at Helena, Don Wolf, he's since retired. Great guy. Shout out to him. He really taught me a lot about just ways of working in this business and having that soft agronomic approach of influence and getting what you want without kicking doors down and making people mad. Um, that's something I'll always appreciate, and he's the one that kind of opened up some paths for me.
Beautiful. Love it, man. That's great. What is the approach to not kicking doors down and making people's mad? I would love you to unpack that one.
Yeah, if you're a big foreign policy buff, they always talk
Mhm.
about these soft power approaches, and that's where you've got to have those diplomatic skills of offering up your knowledge and offering up stuff that you can do to folks, because eventually you might need to call that favor in, right? And
Mm,
to get something that you want, and it's not about being manipulative. It's just more about building influence and building a rapport and building that some of that just that soft power. And I think that's the key to modern business relationships is just uh,
yep,
having utility and providing value to folks that maybe are a little different from the old days where you could kind of horsewhip people into getting what you need.
sure. I like that approach. I mean, the diplomatic approach really is what it is. But if you want to, I mean, really, to me, it's it's creating an imbalanced equation
Sure.
in what I call the value equation, right? So transparently, from a marketing perspective, the primary reason probably that we make this podcast is to add value into the market.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have sponsors. We don't get paid for any of these. We have no revenue generated directly because of the podcast that we know of,
Limp
right?
Bizkit's not going to kick in some bucks here.
I doubt it. Like I
Yeah.
just
Fred
like,
Durst, are you listening?
when I'm thinking about where Mark going to allocate his time this week, it's
Yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah.
not reaching out to that company or their producer or
Sure, sure.
uh, their agent. Uh, but when we just keep putting these interviews out there,
Yeah,
and we're getting good feedback, like the downloads are good, people continue to listen to it. We promote it on LinkedIn, but not a ton, and the downloads are pretty consistent, and continuing to increase. So we know that there's an intake for us, it's an output of value. We're just trying to put value into the industry. And my belief is that if we're putting more value in than we ask back for, right? If I put more in than I'm asking for, then from a business perspective, we should never go hungry.
yeah. There you go.
Does that make sense? Like that. I
Yeah,
mean, that is the whole philosophy that we run this thing off of, is give, 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 right? And occasionally, hey, we're going to ask for a meeting. We're going to ask for a conversation. We're going to send you a proposal. We got to run a business at the end of the day and keep our people paid, right? So, but that's it. And I think
yeah.
so many people show up to the farm gate when the program comes out,
Sure, sure,
and
sure.
that's it, and not before that, and
Yeah.
that's where the
Relationships matter, right?
yep.
And I think offering up your skill set is a great way to network and build those relationships is because ultimately down the road you want to be that trusted person somebody calls when they do have something go wrong or they need something or some sort of combination of all those.
Absolutely. What types of practices do you have for keeping energy up and maximizing your personal productivity? I would imagine you have to have a fairly high level of it.
It took me a long time to learn this. So for those of you that are listening that are maybe new to the management game, being a manager is a lot like doing heavy bar squats at the gym. Like, sure you can do it, but you gotta like recharge afterwards. You gotta know when to rest. You gotta know when to chill out a little bit and recharge. And that took me I don't know 8 years to learn that. You just couldn't go all the time because as a manager, you've got to be able to contribute individually, but you've got to be like this team leader who is really, I think, judged on your decision quality. And that's where the rest comes in. Like you've got to be able to recharge your batteries and take your PTO, go on vacation, go exercise, eat well if you can. Take that time for your brain to sort of, I don't know, reset and sharpen up again, right? Like sharpen the saw.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so weirdly enough, I keep my energy up by resting. I don't I
Mm-hmm.
don't try to go 24/7 now like I used to, and
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. And it took me a while to become okay with that.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. It's we teach something in our program, in our Thriving Leader program, called the Law of Infusion. Yeah, and the definition of the Law of Infusion is that I can only infuse others to the degree that I first infuse myself.
Yeah,
Right.
cool. That's good. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And it's so important. What you said, it was interesting. I loved your take on it. Your perspective was, we have to recognize that we do get judged on decision quality.
yep,
And what I find is when I'm the most tired, that's when I generally make the poorest decisions.
yeah.
And a lot of us out here are just like, we're just grinding, and you're
Hmm.
grinding and grinding, but you haven't really stopped lately to to just kick back and think about, like, well, do I really need to grind this way?
Yeah,
Right? Or this hard on this thing? Is there someone else who should be doing this, who would benefit from this experience, and
yeah,
that would, help them to grow their career, that I could delegate to, that would allow me to take a beat, go rest up a little bit, and then come back and be a better decision maker. So
yeah,
sometimes poor decision making is actually just your inability to have the energy, uh, to actually think about what to do or what not to do.
yeah, yeah. I think a lot of us in the last 5 to 6 years, with the advent of Teams meetings and Zoom calls and in-person meetings and travel, it's like it's easy just to spread yourself too thin and learning how to say no to some of those ones that, hey, send the junior member on the team to go listen to that. They'll learn something, and you get an hour to go think about, I don't know, the budgets or whatever else, whatever you got to do, right? Um, yeah, I think that learning how to rest is difficult in our business culture, but I think more folks are recognizing the power of it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good stuff, man. What before we bring this in for a full landing, what books, podcasts, resources ought we be paying attention to that you like?
I thought about this, and I read business books and listen to business podcasts, but I think if you're looking for something different, one thing that I am sort of that's on my mind a lot is like, how did we get here? Like, how did this thing happen? I'm really into heavy metal, really into death metal. So there's this great book called Choosing Death: The Improbable History of Death Metal and Grindcore. It's on Amazon for like $2. Worth it. So even if you don't like this music, what's interesting about it is that like the genre went from just like Black Sabbath in the late 60s, early 70s to like modern, what we call modern death metal now,
Hmm.
in a very short amount of time. And it's like, how did we get there? And that's such an
Right.
interesting thing to think about, because every concept in your life, whether it's urea fertilizer or seed treatment or glyphosate, whatever you're selling, whatever you're doing, understanding how did we get here? How did this thing happen? I think it's such a cool way to sort of appreciate some of your passions in life. One of mine is
Hmm.
death metal, so just knowing where it came from, how it got here, and
Yeah.
what kind of passion fueled the development of it has been cool. And I try to recognize that passion in other people for the stuff they're into, and really kind of get into it. It's fun.
Yeah. Good. I like it. It's a great recommendation. Well, man, we will pick that up. I don't know if if hopefully we'll be able to pick up that book and link that up in the show notes for Amazon if anybody wants to go grab it. But
I appreciate
if
that.
that's not your thing, hopefully you get the concept, because I do like where you're coming from on that concept. It is interesting to think about how did we get from where we were to where we are. I think it's a fascinating concept. What any last thoughts or considerations for the group, Carl?
I think have that intentionality, set your goals, and make your plans. And I think when you are writing out your plans, make sure you put that time for resting in there and recharging. And I think you'll hit your goals in a much better spot than maybe otherwise.
Perfectly stated, my friend. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I appreciate it.